Warning! This is for entertainment purposes only. Do not take this seriously. This is not medical advice. Although I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor yet. If you want me to be your doctor, click the link in the description box. But otherwise, this is just for fun, kids. Don't do this at home. You're watching Dr. Todd Lee TV, where theoretically you could learn a bunch of cool shit. Greetings, Earthlings! Like, subscribe, and share this video. Share with a friend. Share with enemies. Share with people who think they know everything. Spread it like herpes. It doesn't matter to me. Also, speaking of herpes, I am a medical doctor, and I could be your doctor. That only requires you to click the link in the description box. I can order you blood work. I can read the blood work. I can treat any illnesses. Basically, it's like an HRT clinic that's a one-man army. Also, I do coaching. Dr. Karina Dodson and I have a coaching business called Apex Coaching. So if you sign up with me, you get coaching, which is nutrition, programming, competition prep, or lifestyle coaching, as well as all the medical stuff. So you have 3 people, 2 doctors in one business. It's going to be the contest prep, the nutritionist, the programming person, and the doctor all in one. You can't beat it. It's integrated. It works the best that way. You'll love it. Make sure to do it. Click the link in the description box. What's up, man?
What's going on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I wanted to get that bullshit out of the way first. Do we have an echo of me on your end?
No, should I?
I don't know. Because on Paul's podcast, I usually have to wear headphones because it's noisy. That's the word. Noisy.
Okay. But you can hear me clearly, though?
Oh, I can hear you clear, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm gonna turn off my air conditioning.
And I bought the same microphone as him, so.
All right, cool. I'm gonna turn off my microphone. Hold on. I mean, not my microphone, my air conditioning. I know people are like, the fuck, man? Why is Todd so unprofessional with his shit? Oh, my CPAP's still on. Hold on.
Is our friend joining us?
Yeah, he is, which is funny because he was blowing me up. He was blowing me up to get on here today. Like, he was very attentive. But I wanted to get the party started because I know how boring it is to sit through that shit. So as soon as one person logged in, I was going to start the preamble nonsense.
Cool.
And we can introduce you. This is, now you're a PhD candidate?
Yeah. I have a couple years.
So this is soon to be Dr. Kurt Havens. You've seen him on Anabolic Bodybuilding, teaching us all about the truth on the inside. He's our man inside the pharmaceutical industry. He's basically inside the evil pyramid of collecting finances. But without that pyramid, we wouldn't have all of the tasty treats that we need in order to grow big muscles and lose fat. And you're a PhD, not in pharmacology, but endocrinology, correct?
Yep.
So why don't you tell us more about yourself and your history so that our viewers know you?
So I went to college undergrad for chemistry. And then both my parents were physicians, and I took the MCATs, and then I decided to change industries altogether, and I worked in fashion for 15 years or so. And then I went back and got my master's in chemistry, and then started this PhD program 2 years ago.
Okay, cool. So now, did you have a concentration in your chemistry? Because chemistry is a big subject.
Undergrad? It was pre-med, so.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
so
it's specific chemistry.
Yeah, it was basically the prep course for the MCAT. Yeah, I did the same prep course, the 4-year expensive as fuck prep course for the MCAT. that, and then you take the prep course for the MCAT, which is like 10 weeks and is more useful.
Exactly right.
I'm putting this on my headphones. 1 second.
What's up, man? Let's play around with this. How do we do this? There we go. That's more fun. I wish I could make it like set up a different way. No, that's boring. Let's do it this way.
Yeah.
All right.
Todd, good to see you.
Can you hear us okay, Austin? I'm having a hard time hearing you.
How about, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that was a little bit better, yeah.
Here, I'm going to shut my AC off.
Yeah, that's what I had to do. We've got a lot to cover today, but I definitely want to address right now. Kurt just introduced himself and that he has a bachelor's in chemistry. And he's
we've talked. Good to meet you face to face, man. My name's Austin. And Todd, yeah, it's good to see you again. We've talked on Paul's podcast.
Yeah. And
I was super discombobulated when I did that.
Well, we went back and we didn't not have a shirt on, and I was giving you shit about not wearing a shirt because you didn't have air conditioning that day.
I think I did. Yeah, I didn't have a shirt.
I was just like, there's just some shirtless dude I don't know showing up on the podcast, and I was just roasting him about not wearing a shirt. And I was like, thinking at the time, I'm like, I'm such a dick to strangers. It's like I'd have so many more friends if I was nice.
Yeah, and also I've never done chats online. So when you're talking with like multiple people, it's not as clean of a break when you insert words into the conversation as when you're face to face. So also my sound, is it better now? The AC's off.
Yeah, it's a little bit better, yeah.
Okay.
What I found was for someone who's an Asperger kid like me and doesn't pick up on body language or tone of voice, it's hard as fuck to know when someone stops talking because everyone sounds like this to me. Yeah. So what's actually not a pause, when there isn't a period, because a period doesn't have a sound. They don't say stop like you're dictating. So you don't know where there's a period except for the pause, but every word sounds like there's a pause. So it sounds like I'm interrupting everyone because I can't pick up on whether they're winding down or if they're still going or whatever.
Yeah. Really and to be fair, it's harder. It's harder when it's not in person too. So, but yeah, it's an Aspie's worst nightmare if you're trying to talk with a bunch of people online.
So I've been doing this for 7 years now, podcasts. And so I'm basically got the social skills of an 8-year-old. Rather than when I started, I had the social skills of like a 4-year-old.
So you're double now. You got twice.
So Kurt is a PhD in endocrinology, or is working on it. He's halfway through his program. And he also works in the pharmaceutical industry, correct, Kurt?
Not, no, I've done 1099 work. I'm not employed by any company.
Okay, then
the majority of my information like you.
I introduced you wrongly. I said that you're part of the evil pyramid making drugs and making profits, but in fact, you are not. You are just a student.
And I won't. Yeah, and I won't be employed by any of them.
Okay, so I really feel bad about that.
No, it doesn't matter.
It's almost like I called you on the podcast to then just echo you like that Lucy woman did with Andrew Tate or something. So why don't you tell us about yourself, Austin?
So I started bodybuilding in like just about January 2022, and I went all out right out of the gate because from 2012, 13-ish, I had started my own business, which was I was a grower actually, and I would build and design grow rooms for the compassion centers in my state. So that was like taking up 100-hour work weeks, and just the laser focused mindset I had at the time. I wouldn't eat a lot during the day and just would work, being moderately active. So I was never big to begin with. I was like 135, 140 pounds. Like that was the heaviest I ever was in my life. And I wasted down to like 128 pounds just doing all that work. So I have that picture on my Instagram where I'm just standing there like Skeletor. And during the pandemics, just some things went wrong, and I, lost some money. So I decided to shut down because there's quite a bit of overhead with that line of work. and I needed something to fill my time. So I used the last bit of money I had, bought some loadable Rogue dumbbells and moved them into the basement where I'd work. So instead of going to work, I would go work out. And, you know, I had been looking into like, you know, the biohacking, you know, health optimization sphere and stuff like that for a while too. So I became, you know, I got on TRT and started bodybuilding at the same time, but that didn't stay just TRT for very long, you know, being
also, can I interrupt for 1 second? Were you,
sure.
Were you hypogonadal, or did you just?
So, I think I might have chatted with this about you. I had middle range testosterone levels each time I checked, you know, 370 to 5 something, but my estradiol was always
low,
like half the bottom end of the reference range. So, and, you know, so I, you know, hearing what I knew about Alzheimer's progression and after menopause in women, and that being suspected to be, you know, related to that, cardiac health and all that, I was like, you know, maybe my estrogen's too low. Let's see what happens if I boost up my total testosterone and free even more, you know, to kind of get me into the healthy reference range. And it did to a degree, but I have very low aromatase expression, it seems like.
Okay. One of the reasons why I thought this would be a good, you know, both of you are people that are very bright and seem to really know anabolic pharmacology, that Austin's a bit of a savant. And Austin is onto something that's over my head involving SHBG. And Kurt, I mentioned to you that Austin was delving into this and had some incredible gains doing something experimental with SHBG. And then Austin had mentioned to me that he had already discussed it with you. And I was like, this is silly. Why are we doing this bullshit with text? Why don't we have a call where all of us discuss it on video? Because I have a feeling people will find this interesting amongst all the other subjects that you and I could discuss. Kurt. So with that, Austin, why don't you tell us what you accomplished with SHBG, how you accomplished it?
Sure. So
why that worked.
Okay, sure. So, you know, this isn't proof on one subject, but let me do a real brief summarization of my intro for the important part of this SHBG topic. I started bodybuilding and becoming enhanced in January of 2022 at 128 pounds. And this off season, I got up to 218 pounds. So that's exactly 90 pounds that I got to in, you did the math, I think this is 19 months. So I never really, I'm new also, but, you know, I never really heard of that level of development rate. It's not like I have some insane, crazy physique or anything, but I think just at the level, like, you know, I've kind of been like surprised how quickly this has gone. And I've heard other people mention this, that SHBG seemed to be tied to progression, and that anecdotally when bodybuilders would like overdo proviron, things that would lower SHBG, or just using test for prolonged off seasons and prolonged bulks, they started to become unproductive. And, you know, the rate of growth and progress wasn't the same as when one initially first got on. So part of that, you know, hypothesis is that maybe when you're just starting out a new cycle, you had just been off for a period, and that can allow SHBG to come up, and other things in the body, I'm sure, are resetting too. But, you know, it's that maybe SHBG somewhat, like, you could think of it like estradiol. Like, if it's too low, it doesn't, you can have all the androgens present in the world, but you're kind of working against yourself.
Do you have a mechanism for why that is? Why do you think that if SHBG is low, it matters as much as, for instance, we know the mechanisms in which estradiol can facilitate anabolic growth and hypertrophy.
So I'm not as familiar with the exact mechanisms for estradiol, but there have been studies done in prostate where the sex hormone binding globulin receptor complex on the cell surface, when the SHBG molecule binds to that cell surface receptor, the SHBG-RC, which stands for sex hormone binding globulin receptor complex, a free androgen then binds to that, and that augments the activity when a free androgen binds at the cytoplasmic nuclear AR, and that has been shown. But in term, I don't know if it's been demonstrated.
Well, before we move on, let's address this. So I wrote an article about this study, I think in 2014, and that no one knew that SHBG had any actual receptors until they found that the SHBG estrogen complex, when estrogen binds to SHBG, SHBG can then bind to the prostate and then upregulates androgen receptor density on the surface, thus proliferating or creating the environment in which prostate cancer occurs. Ipso facto, rather than just targeting DHT, one can eliminate estrogen from the person, and that can prevent the prostate cancer. And that was an angle that I used to work, whereas part of my working model at the time was that estrogen's the bad guy.
Yeah.
And even with prostate loss, estrogen's the bad guy. The DHT is really only an issue for hair loss. Estrogen's responsible for everything. And John Jewett opened my eyes to positive benefits of estrogen in men, namely the conversion of GH to IGF-1, although most men would be more concerned with the fact that estrogen is important for dick health and dick size.
Oh, really? I didn't actually know about that last bit.
Apparently, if you have no estrogen,
anecdotally,
supposed to shrivel up and fall off. But I had no estrogen for years, like sub 10, and my dick did not get smaller. So I don't know who they were testing or whether that the amount of androgens I was on was canceling that out. But what have you?
Kurt, you said something. It cut out, but I didn't hear what you said there.
When he was talking about prostate cancer, I said that vitamin D also aids in that. Low vitamin D will aid in the prostate cancer as well. Okay. So it magnifies that issue with the estrogen.
I see. So
and you can see it in the population that is more prone to getting prostate cancer. Todd, you know the answer to that. Not Caucasian.
Oh.
Or low in vitamin D, and they also tend to, as they get overweight, their estrogen tends to go up as well.
Yeah, we can't talk about that on YouTube.
No, I'm not but you can see it in a population.
We're all one race in medicine in 2023. There's no racial differences in health.
I didn't know about that. That 2014 thing.
Well, I mean, I don't know that the study was from 2014.
That's when you learned about it. Okay, yeah. And I didn't learn about it until recently because I've been looking this up. This all started as just anecdotal stuff. This idea, I learned basically everything I knew about bodybuilding right out of the gate from Vigorous Steve, watching his videos. I mean,
what a great resource we have.
Yeah.
Old farts like me, we didn't have the internet or nothing.
So, right.
I mean, we did, but it was all full of lies. Basically, there's bodybuilding.com. And there was like Skip Hill articles and stuff. And you couldn't trust forums because nobody knew what they were talking about. Or if they did, you wouldn't know if they knew because they had like Daffy Duck or whatever for an icon. And their name was Fuckmaster66 or some shit. So there's not really reliability there as a source of education.
Austin, I just want to back up for a second to clarify. You're saying low sex hormone binding globulin is good or high sex hormone binding globulin is good?
I'm not saying like high as in 60 to 100 nanomole per liter, but something maybe not single digits.
Okay, that's fine. I just make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't.
I can get it. Okay. I can. Yeah.
So you've probably seen in my posts, people are constantly trying to drive it down, and I constantly am telling people to not mess with it because it's a carrier, right? You lose that ability to carry the hormone.
Yeah.
You also will excrete much faster if you trash it.
That's true too.
I just making sure I understood what you were talking about.
Yeah. Okay, we're on the same page then. Yeah, and so much more could be known about it, that needs to be studied. Like, I don't know if you could get to additional tissues too when you have sex hormone binding globulin, like a complex with a free hormone, or not longer free anymore. But I don't know if you can get it to other tissues that way that you couldn't get it to otherwise if it was just free. I don't know if that's been looked at, but
I don't know. I can look into that.
So you attribute your 90 pounds of growth to SHBG being elevated. What did you do to increase your SHBG to a healthy range? Because if I'm not mistaken, if someone's blasting an appropriate amount of gear, even without using boron, they're going to have SHBG go in the toilet.
With testosterone.
With testosterone, yeah.
I found this by completely on accident because of my low aromatase expression. I was able to have 2,000 nanogram per deciliter total T, but still, a middle lower end of the reference range estradiol. So that led me to experimenting with exogenous estradiol intramuscular. And since I already had the exogenous estradiol, I wanted to do DECA only because I'm more of a, tinkerer rather than like somebody who's just bodybuilding just for the mass. Like, this is how I have fun with it. And when I did nandrolone only, as the test wasn't even completely out of my system, my SHBG went from, I have the numbers all here because I have tons of blood work on it, went from 9 to 13 in just 3 weeks.
Okay.
And it only kept going up from there. And at that point, I had already been in a bulk for around 4 months. And I saw a measurable, because I track my weight and I measure body parts, there was an uptick in my growth to actually, even though the weekly total dose was about the same, somewhat lower actually.
So let me stop you right there and make sure I understand correctly. So you swapped out test for nandrolone plus E2. And as
I was on half and half. I was on test and DECA 600.
But you removed the test and added in more DECA and you added in E2. Okay.
Correct.
So you added in you removed the test, added nandrolone and added E2, and you saw an increase in SHBG. That is how the SHBG came up.
Yes.
And that there was not an isolated variable of SHBG rising and body mass rising. It was nandrolone rose, DHT decreased, estradiol rose, likely amount of
estradiol stayed the same.
Oh, it did.
I kept it. I manually wanted to keep it at around 45.
Okay.
Which is where I like best.
So we basically had an increase in nandrolone and an increase in SHBG concurrently, and that resulted in the growth of tissue. We don't know for sure it was due to SHBG. It could be that just the nandrolone was more beneficial to growth than the test. A lot of people hold more water on nandrolone, so a lot of what they think is lean body mass is water mass. Have you accounted for these things?
I have this year. I'm now doing it without DECA. I'm doing it with EQ instead. EQ and estradiol. But what was I going to say? It's possible that it was just nandrolone causing water retention, but I also think I was already on 600 milligrams, 600 test. I dropped the test and switched it to just 1,050 nandrolone. So my actual weekly
total load went down.
My weekly dosage was actually lower,
right?
But it is possible that going from 600 nandrolone to 1,050 nandrolone resulted in just so much more water retention. My intuition tells me that's not the case, considering I was already on 600.
We also took your DHT from something super physiologic, and then it went into the toilet. So
my DHT actually was not super physiological. I have bottom end of the range.
So
DHT
what, you had
levels
30 or something on 600 test?
Do you want me to check?
I mean, if you want to, yeah. And then Kurt, what were you going to say? Because
I was just going to ask. I forget the one. The one question was, how tall are you, Austin?
A hair under 5'11", so I'm like 5'10".
I just wanted to put the weight gain in perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like 5
if you
minutes,
saw his
yeah.
picture, and I wish I was more sophisticated and I was good at sharing my screen and I could pull it up on
I
Instagram.
can look. I follow him on Instagram. I can look at
Yeah,
it.
his before picture is bizarre. That
Okay.
he went from being super skinny. His face got better too.
Okay.
He went from super skinny at 128 pounds and 5'10" to being pretty jacked and model-esque.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I continued that SHBG protocol into my cut this first year. So this is still in my first year of lifting. And I wanted to just make sure it wasn't just DECA that was working to not push SHBG down. So for my cut, I dropped the DECA and did Trenbolone, Masteron, Winstrol suspension, and injectable estradiol. And my SHBG kept increasing.
Okay. So it seems to be the case that you're artificially supplemented E2 drives up SHBG.
Yeah.
I think it's the combination of testosterone and DHT both have by far multiple fold higher SHBG binding affinity compared to even Primo, Masteron, EQ, whatever. They're 70 for test.
Like 16% of.
Yeah, and normally Primobolan, Masteron, Anavar even, you see a decrease in SHBG when guys typically use those. My thinking on that is something I actually kind of talked with Todd about, that he seems to think is the case. When you reduce or when you compete for aromatase by adding in Primo or Masteron, less test can go through the aromatase pathway and has to go through the 5-alpha reductase pathway.
Right.
So I think that adding Primo to test raises DHT, and that is likely what drives down the SHBG. It may not be the Primo itself.
Right, and that's because you're the only person I've ever met that came up with that hypothesis, and Kurt's familiar with the idea that you drive the reaction to the other endpoint by blocking one of the pathways. Then that he pointed out that you would have to know biochemistry to even think of something like that.
Yeah, no, it's impressive that you came up with that. Todd and I were talking about Masteron metabolites doing that stuff similar. But
yeah.
So that
I follow along with all of this stuff, like
I know
when I'm walking out, so I listen. It's not. I'm not totally in a vacuum here. I get a lot of this from you guys. We all share.
Yeah.
Right, but everyone else on the planet is still telling me they take 2 cc's of this and 1 cc of that. So, I mean,
I have somebody who I help out who refers to doses that way.
Like that to me is the biggest red flag ever. Is like this almost like black tag scenario. Is when they measure their drugs by the volume. So the question is for you. Okay, so this is what's confusing for me. SHBG, even if it's bound to DHT, still exists. So why isn't it showing up on blood work? Unless the assay is binding the available receptors of SHBG to find out what is free SHBG. Because I would think that the total testosterone would be free testosterone and the testosterone that's bound to SHBG and the amount that's bound to albumin. Ipso facto, there is SHBG there. So what, Provirin, Masteron, it's supposed to bind the SHBG and take it out of circulation, but it's still there. Whereas my understanding is boron is supposed to eliminate SHBG. So that's the part that I always found confusing, is when someone has low SHBG, is like, this implies to me that it's not being produced and it's being eliminated as normal decay rate.
Yeah.
I think the decay rate is being increased. That's how I think of it, but I'm not totally sure of that. I think when you have more things to bind and occupy it, you're using up, like if you have more things to bind to SHBG, you have, once they're bound to SHBG, that SHBG molecule is used up. Basically.
But isn't the point of it as a carrier? It's supposed to protect things from being broken down. It's like
and also to limit what's just like a bolus in your blood, right? So where it's bound to albumin, it's bound. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
So it's considered bioavailable if it's bound to sex hormone binding globulin, because it's bound and it's being carried. But when it gets to the cell receptor, it's then unlocked. Versus albumin, you can't use those hormones.
Yeah,
Really?
it's not
And
like
females-
it's actually uptaking the SHBG. The SHBG molecule is getting used when
I
it's
see.
bound.
So
to
once
that
it goes into the cytoplasm,
And it's
they
binding to
separate it. Once it binds to the androgen receptor complex moves towards the nucleus for transcription, whereas the SHBG gets put into a lysosome and is broken down. That makes more sense.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
protein, so it's going to be degraded that way.
It doesn't just get ejected from the cytosol back into free circulation for reuse. It gets broken down.
No, because it would re-originate back from the liver again. New.
Well, one would hope.
That's
Unless you've
weird.
crushed your
And
liver.
I'm just backing up for the people watching in case they don't understand. So my understanding is your SHBG was low because your estradiol is low.
It was
Yeah,
low
initially,
because
when you
it was
saw-
low. Yeah, it was my SHBG when I was natural actually was like 58 to 60. So it was, but that's because I'm a lifetime natural at that point. But I think being on 600 tests for 4 months was enough to drive it down. So
Yep.
Well, that's
I did a brief stint. I did it like within when I first started testosterone, that early 2022, I did add in some Primo. Like this was really early on. And that did actually temporarily lower my estrogen and SHBG even more. So that got me well started on the road to quickly lowering my SHBG, I think.
Okay.
I ended up taking that Primo out after just like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But yeah.
All right, fantastic. So do you have any more questions, Kurt, about this SHBG issue with the hypothesis of why it's working?
No, I mean, I believe him to be correct with most of it, if not all of it. I don't know if all of the muscle gains were directly from sex hormone binding globulin.
Oh yeah.
I
No,
mean,
I don't believe that. I don't believe
genetic
that
response
to be the
steroids.
case.
No,
I don't believe it to be the case. It was all of that gains. I think it allowed me to continue making steady progress without like coming off and having to like spend 3 to 4 months or whatever guys would usually take to clean out and
Which
close.
is garbage in and of itself. But
Yeah, it should be about your health. Are you healthy? Are you able to keep going?
So I guess the next question is, how is it facilitative? So it carries the molecules in the blood, so your free test is lower, but your bioavailable test is higher.
Yep.
One could assume that means that free nandrolone was lower, but bioavailable nandrolone was higher. That it's protecting the nandrolone molecule as it moves through the bloodstream, and that it allows for a greater rate of muscular uptake of nandrolone, and thus we get more yield per unit given, so that his 1,000 nandrolone could be functioning as equivalent to 1,500 nandrolone or 2,000 nandrolone, so that the SHBG is almost a drug amplifier.
Yes. So in females, the estrogen is bound to sex hormone binding globulin. Right. So their smaller amount of testosterone then is much more available to them.
Right.
In that way, because it's.
So wait, are you saying that only estrogen is bound to SHBG in females? Like, my understanding is some degree of test DHT and estrogen are all bound to SHBG.
Some degree, but we would primarily say it would be estrogen that would be bound. Just like in a male, it technically could be some level of estrogen as well, but it's generally not.
Oh, I had it backwards, I guess, because my thinking was in females specifically, more of their DHT would be bound to SHBG to regulate the androgenicity. Like, so that way, whatever, like let's say they still have a significant amount of DHT, they may not be experiencing the same degree of virilizing effects because SHBG is acting as a buffer for that.
I thought that the binding affinity.
That's just me guessing. I'm not saying I think you're wrong or anything. I just have had it backwards up to this point, if that's the case.
I thought the relative binding affinity was higher for DHT than E2 to SHBG. That if you had an equal amount, which this is not the case, if you had an equal amount of DHT and E2, more of the DHT would bind to the SHBG molecule, and less of the E2 would bind to the SHBG molecule as present. But
now
perhaps in Kurt, what Kurt's saying is the majority of a woman's SHBG is bound to E2, not due to it having a higher binding affinity, but because of how much more available substrate is available. If you have a 100-to-1 ratio of E2 molecules to DHT molecules, then at least 99% of those SHBGs are going to be bound to the E2 molecule, because all of their DHT may be bound, but it still is only going to account for maybe 4% of the available SHBG.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Todd just phrased it better than I did.
And I lost you, Todd, with the mechanism when you were going into the bioavailable testosterone and bioavailable nandrolone and free nandrolone being taken by SHBG. I lost you on that concept. So
here's what I'm thinking, like, what does SHBG do? SHBG binds to testosterone in the blood and it protects it from being broken down. The immune system doesn't detect it as a foreign body and kill it because it's being chaperoned by being bound to SHBG. This means that more of the testosterone gets to your target tissue, like the muscle, than if you didn't have the SHBG. So someone with a low SHBG and a 2000 test will have less anabolic out of that 2000 test than if they had a medium SHBG in that same 2000 test. Now, in your case, because you took out all the tests and you only had nandrolone, the only way that it could benefit you is either A, it has its own receptor, it has its own anabolic function of itself.
Which one, nandrolone?
Or B, what it's doing is it's chaperoning the nandrolone as it moves to your body, and so your body doesn't detect it. For example, if I take 1400 deca, I have flu-like symptoms. If I take 1000 deca and 800 EQ, I don't have flu-like symptoms. Okay. This is what I brought up to Planet Mike, and he said I should go back to med school because it's eosinophilia. But that wasn't my question, bud. It was, why is it that my total load could be 14, but when it's a single compound, I'm getting attacked by my immune system, but if my total load's 1800 and I've split it between two agents, if it's below 1000 each, my body doesn't notice. Well, so in this case, what I'm saying is the SHBG is probably acting as a chaperone, carrying the nandrolone through your body under the radar of your immune system so it can get to the muscle and get its anabolic effect. Whereas without that SHBG, you'd be getting more of your nandrolone chewed up so that 1000 nandrolone would be less.
I get what you're saying now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. What were you saying, Tom? Well, I mean, Kurt.
I was just going to say, in his case, with the equipoise and the nandrolone together, equipoise has a higher efficacy for the androgen receptor than nandrolone and more than testosterone. So you're probably going to get, you basically kind of push the nandrolone out of the way too, so equipoise can bind.
So I thought the nandrolone has a higher binding affinity than anything else.
That's affinity, what I thought too.
Not efficacy. So it'll get kicked. You know what I mean? This is where EQ gets really weird. Is that equipoise will stick around longer too. So if a lot of guys can't run tests lower than it because it'll completely block testosterone from ever having any chance of binding.
So my understanding was equipoise had like a 0.8 coefficient for binding affinity. Yeah. Nandrolone has a 1.54 coefficient for binding affinity, and trenbolone has a 1.3 coefficient for binding affinity relative to test baseline of 1 binding affinity.
Yeah, but so I don't know. Equipoise is 49% versus test is 31. DHT is 100.
Wait, DHT is 100?
DHT is 100%.
Okay.
And same as trenbolone, same as methyltrianolone. Right, methyltrianolone is probably more, but
wait, tren is also a 100.
Close, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then you're saying that EQ's got a binding affinity of 0.49.
Yeah, versus testosterone
binding affinity of 0.31.
Yeah.
Wow, so that's where EQ is useful.
Or it could be harmful, right? It could push test out of the way.
Well, but nandrolone's supposed to be up there too, right?
I didn't have that on that list. I don't know why.
Oh, damn, Kurt, dropping the ball here.
Everything else.
Do you have Masteron and
supposed
Primo
to be an encyclopedia?
I try. Well, believe it or not,
you don't have Masteron and
we
Primo.
don't actually study this stuff anymore. So if I don't take it upon myself to,
that would be cool if we had Masteron and Primo on there to know which one has a higher binding affinity.
why don't I, you know what? Why don't I make a chart and I'll email it to you and you can put it up in the next video.
That would be awesome. That would be,
figuring that out.
That's the most valuable piece of information in existence, right?
The only thing I would say is
The
I
Rosetta
could
Stone.
only find the one for Primo in rats and roosters, and Masteron is known.
Oh, then it's,
I'm not even sure that there's actually an anabolic rating for Masteron. I've never seen it. Have you seen the assay for it?
It's a 200 anabolic.
You have seen this?
So, well, after we finish this.
Yeah, what's up?
Well, this is the topic of like free Androlone being more available, like being shuttled in and protected by SHBG. That's a totally separate mechanism that it could also be working by to increase my growth, but I didn't consider that one. I was considering it a different way entirely, but we can get to that after.
Possible.
Oh, here it is. Okay, so the anabolic to androgenic ratio, I've got one study showed it was 60 to 24, and then another study showed it was 130 to 40. And then the androgen receptor affinity is 100. For SHBG affinity is medium to high.
For drostanolone?
Yeah. Dromo, standalone.
Yeah.
Masteron. Yeah.
Okay. Send me that later. I'd love to see that.
What?
Send me that later. I'd love to see that.
Okay. So let's see here. Do we want to switch to, I think what we should do is end this video so that because for marketing purposes, people want, the keyword SHBG, they're not going to want to watch. If we do SHBG and Masteron and GH, it's going to be a mess. They won't know who to show this to. So I'd rather do 3 separate videos than do one 90-minute video.
Just I had the quick point was that, I'm not totally versed on from androgen, free androgen, all the way through to transcription to like actual tissue. But what it was shown was that when you had that SHBG receptor complex on the cell membrane bound and activated, that you got an increase in the cyclic AMP response from when that free androgen bound. So when a regular free androgen bounds, like it augments and enhances the signal.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah, there's basically, so there's cytosolic receptors, which will migrate the complex right to the nucleus and begin DNA transcription. And that's usually steroid hormones. All water-soluble things like SHBG are going to bind to a membrane receptor, and it's going to either start a GS or a GI pathway. Basically, it's an inhibitory or stimulatory signal, and they all work through cyclic AMP as a second messenger.
And that would be considered non-genomic.
Yeah. Oh, fuck. That's what that means. Okay. So
yeah. So and the non-genomic ones that don't go in to the cytosol, those effects occur within seconds. They start. They're really fast.
Like becoming an asshole on Halo.
Yes. Okay. Non-genomic.
I just tried some Halo.
You're not permanently
an
an asshole.
Week,
you're just temporarily an asshole. All right. So I'm going to end this video and then we'll start another one on the next subject.
Okay.
All right, people. Make sure to follow Kurt. His links will be in the description box. And Austin was kind enough to make his title his link, but I'm going to put that in the description box as well, so you can click on that. And of course, you can get a hold of me. My link tree will be in the description box. May the force be with you.